welcome to the programme. There will be tears shed, memorial services held across the world, and possibly some fine words spoken this weekend. But 25 years after the Srebrenica massacre, what is in place to make sure that nothing similar can ever happen again? This is Roundtable. Hello from me, David Foster. Sadly, since July the 11th, 1995, there have been more atrocities directed at specific religious and racial groups. So, what lessons still need to be learned after the events that led to the deaths of more than 8,000 Muslims, mainly men and boys?
The Bosnian War from 1992 till 1995 saw the systematic ethnic cleansing of the country's Muslim population. The war culminated in the Srebrenica genocide during July 1995. The murder of over 8,000 Muslim men and boys was the worst atrocity in Europe since World War II. And on the 25th anniversary of the genocide, many are asking if the lessons have really been learnt. Today, the town of Srebrenica sits inside the Bosnian Serb territory Republika Srpska, where genocide denial is common and often brazen. Milorad Dodik, the current Serb member of the presidency of Bosnia and Herzegovina, has dismissed Srebrenica as a fabricated myth. Many Srebrenica survivors say their neighbours who took part in the killings still live among them, openly and unpunished. Far-right political discourse is part of the mainstream in many European countries. Last year, the Christchurch mosque shooter played Serbian nationalist songs glorifying the perpetrators of Srebrenica as he live-streamed the shooting. And while the idea of a new genocide in Europe seems unlikely, Srebrenica remains a warning about what can happen to religious and ethnic minorities.
Well, I'm very happy to welcome from Srebrenica Emir Suljagic, director of the Srebrenica Memorial Centre, who narrowly escaped the genocide there. To Srebrenica now, just a few hours from Srebrenica, Almasa Salihovic is there. She lost her older brother in the slaughter. And in London, there's Safet Vukalic, a survivor of the 1992 Prijedor massacre, Prijedor being about 5 hours away from Srebrenica. I'm going to ask each one of you to tell me your personal story about those times, if I may. And Almasa, I'm going to start with you. Your brother, 18 years old, and your family was separated. What happened to him?
Well, on 11th of July, while Ratko Mladic was entering the town of Srebrenica, we started to run towards Potachari UN base in hope that they will protect us. There were 6 of us, 5 of us children, and with our mother. And as it was getting very, very crowded in the streets, everybody was running towards the Potachari. My eldest sister, Fatima, and my brother, Abdullah, they simply went before us. And in that moment, they managed to enter the battery factory, which is today part of a memorial in Potachari. So as they entered, nobody could enter anymore because it was very much filled with people. So the UN soldiers simply closed the door, so nobody could enter or go out of this battery factory. So my mother and my other brother and sister, we came after them, but we couldn't go inside. So we stood there by the walls and stayed there for the next 3 days. And all of that time, we didn't know what was happening inside the battery factory. And as we were waiting for something to happen, and on the 13th of July, when the buses started to come to pick us up and simply take us to the free territory, we were hoping to find Fatima and Abdullah as well. However, it was impossible. There were so many thousands and thousands of people. So all what we could do, just stick together, and we went to the buses and managed to enter somehow in one of those buses.
So Fatima as well,
No,
Fatima
no,
as well in
no.
there. But what happened to her and to Abdullah?
All of this time they were inside the battery factory, and they were the last ones. I mean, among those people, they were the last ones to leave Potocari UN base. So more than 239 names you have in Potocari, that boys and men who were killed, and among those 239, it was my brother as well. So she, as she was, sharing her story with me just this year, my sister, she said that he was with her walking toward the buses that came to pick them up. However, they were walking in a line 2 by 2. So there were two groups of soldiers who were dividing women and female and men from each other. So they let men on the other side and women on the buses and trucks. So he was separated from her at that moment, saying that he will take another bus. However, that never
So
happened.
your brother was executed. Did you ever find his body?
Yes, he was executed, and in 2008 we received a call that his body remains were found in one of the secondary mass graves close to city of Zvornik, actually called Chanchari, and only 30% of his body remains were found, and we simply didn't want to wait anymore to be found. We wanted him to find peace in a way, and we actually, as a family, decided to bury him the same year, 2008, 11th of July, in Memorial Complex.
These are all terribly personal stories. Appreciate how difficult it is for you to share them. I'll come back to you, Almasa, if I may, in just a moment, to ask about life after and what lessons you believe, if any, can be learned from this. But let me go to Emir Suljagic. You're now director of the Srebrenica Memorial. So you were a UN interpreter there. And I think you've said that you've been tortured ever since because Ratko Mladic actually let you go and took others.
Before I turn to that, can I, as Almasa was saying, and as Almasa was talking about her family and her family members ending up in the battery factory, and then the list that she's referring to is actually I made it. I was an interpreter there. I was the one who insisted with the Dutch battalion that we open a hole in the fence. Some 6,000 people walked in. This is the first time I'm actually meeting someone related to someone I tried saving back in July 1995. The list that she refers to is, I made it. I pretty much wrote down almost every single name in the completely futile belief that if we write down their names, if we identify them, that will somehow protect them. I, together with Hasan Ohanovic, handed over the list to Deputy Commander of Dutchbat, Major Rob Franken, who told us that he was going to send that list to the UN headquarters in Zagreb and Geneva, and keep the original, and I'm quoting here, in his pants, so that it's not discovered. And when we all got out of Srebrenica, we realized that the list never left Srebrenica and was in fact found in the bottom of a drawer somewhere in the UN headquarters in Zagreb. By that time, it was too late for anyone on that list. And listening to Almasa speak, I never knew she existed. Listening to her speak today makes me feel like a complete and total failure. It wasn't my place to save anybody. I could hardly save myself. The only reason I'm alive is that Ratko Mladic shows that I shouldn't be killed at that particular moment when I met him. And then my life was saved literally by my colleague, Hasan Ohanovic, who lost his entire family on the afternoon of July 13th. Hasan literally snuck himself into the Dutch battalion operations room and made a call to the UN headquarters in Tuzla, and said there was a retired American colonel working there. Kenneth Weiser. I don't know if he's still alive. And anyway, he said, these guys are going to hand us over to the Serbs. So if there's anything you can do, it would be, this is the time. And then about 15 minutes later, Dachbat were notified that Hassan and I had legal contracts with the United Nations, and that should anything happen to us, United Nations would be legally liable. And that's the only reason we survived. The UN didn't want to pay out damages to our families.
Goodness gracious.
So
I can see how emotionally, how difficult this is for you. And maybe Almasa and you can talk more.
We can pick this conversation up at some other point.
Yeah.
I'm really glad to
Can
meet you. I never knew about you. I'm sorry.
It's okay, we'll have time.
Can I bring in Safet at this point? 5 hours away, I think Prijedor was. There was the ethnic cleansing of that particular area. You managed to get out, but people you'd known all your life were suddenly camp commandants or guards at the concentration camps. What kind of a scar has that left on you?
Sorry, I was getting actually emotional listening to the other two guests. So it feels fresh as it was in '95. It's very difficult because sometimes when we talk about these stories and neighbors and friends who were guarding the camps or killing people, etc., that was absolutely the case. However, I will start by saying the soldiers, for example, that picked up my dad and my brother in my neighborhood, they were from around Balkans, so Croatia, from Serbia, in Serbian army, and from other areas in Bosnia. So they weren't actually our neighbors who came to pick, certainly from our streets, people. In fact, one of the soldiers introduced himself to my dad, and he said he was from Serbia. But it was hard to see our neighbors watching from the windows what was happening, and people being taken away. We found out to a concentration camp later. We had no idea what was going to happen. And it was difficult to understand that they could watch that. Then later on, we found out they concentration camp, and yes, some of the guards were locals, some weren't. They also had often visitors who were soldiers from other areas that would come just to kill a few people or abuse them in most awful ways. So it was really difficult to live through that. And this was in '92. We mustn't forget, and I don't know if you recall yourself, reports, but in August '92, reports by Penny Marshall, Ed Buliami, and Ian Williams, I think, from ITN and Guardian, produced a video report of Omoska and Ternopil concentration camps. And I really felt this was going to affect the world. Everyone's going to say, no more, we got to stop this. Yet 3 years later, we had Srebrenica. Killing.
I remember the terrible, sorry, Bati, the terrible pictures of those poor people inside the concentration camps behind the bars, and the fact that some people denied that it was actually happening, that this was reality, but there it was on our TV screens. I'm going to pause for just a moment, if I may, and we're going to take a look at a film called The Fog of Srebrenica by somebody who was going to be with us today. That is Samir Mahanovic. He made this film. Just a little clip to give our viewers a sense of perhaps what it's like in that area.
Nudio me nemoj Mehmete tamo da gledaš kosti, da gledam lobanju, pola mu je lobanje ima, pola nema.
Tako je. Koga god od komšija, pa što bola ne spaste makar jednog naših brata ili tu, bez obzira ili oca ili ne znam, mi nismo tu bili, pa ima liko da kaže da jeste.
Pa za buduće generacije moram reći da ako mogu uopšte da se oslobode istorije.
It is an extremely evocative film, about an hour long, very emotional. And Emir, living through those times, I want to ask you what your attitude was then and is now of what the outside world did or indeed didn't do.
Well, to be completely honest, I had more pressing issues to address back then. Surviving was overriding concern, to put it mildly, but I did feel completely betrayed by the people around me. The best anybody offered to do for me was a Dutch soldier who said that he was willing to shoot me through the leg so that I would be evacuated with the wounded. Turned out that all the wounded were killed, actually, eventually. But there is a lot of responsibility. One should be really careful about where we lay the responsibility for what happened here. Interestingly enough, the person on whose watch both Bosnia and Rwanda happened, including Srebrenica, which was Kofi Annan, went on to become the UN Secretary General, which kind of, I assume, tells you about the ability to face the responsibility on the part of the World Organization. Now, what I think about today, and today I'm in charge, at least on a daily basis, of the Srebrenica Memorial. And what I want to do here is I want to build a place that will remind us eternally what happens to us when we're weak, when our destiny is in anybody else's hands but our own. And if that represents any kind of evolution, then that would be it. I went from literally struggling to survive, wondering how I actually survived, to the point where I believe that if we're ever as weak as we were in July 1995, we will not survive it. We will not survive another Srebrenica as a nation. We will not survive another Prijedor as a nation. We'll not survive. I for one have never made any difference between the victims of July 92 in Prijedor and July 95 in Srebrenica. They were targeted as part of the same plan. They were targeted by pretty much the same people, the same ideology, as part of the same project. And anyone who survived it in Prijedor is a brother of mine as much as anyone who survived it here in Srebrenica. So,
Emir, can I bring in Almasa at this point? I know you've described the events of 25 years ago and what has happened since as part of a larger defining global battle. What did you mean specifically?
Well, even 25 years after this genocide happened, we still have those who deny it. We don't have still a law that prevents those who deny it, to be punished. It's what I wanted to say is that we are part of Europe, and it happened in Europe. On a global level, 25 years after this genocide happened, we still have a fight and a struggle to prove what actually happened, even if we have all those criminals of war, Ratko Mladic and Radovan Karadzic in prison as well. And we still have this fight. We're still dealing with people believing what happened. So many people don't know actually what happened here. Those around, maybe in Serbia, in Croatia, Bosnia and Herzegovina, however, we need to put it on a much, much higher level globally, just because we are witnesses that some sort of genocides maybe are happening at this point right now. And if Srebrenica in Bosnia and Herzegovina, Prijedor as well, was not enough to say no more, then this fight, it's just at its beginning, not the end. I feel that we're just starting to fight. I'd say this. Our war is not yet finished. Not until people, learn the messages. If they didn't learn from the Holocaust, if they didn't learn from the Srebrenica, I really do not know when they will learn to say never again, and that this never happens again. So it's a battle we must still fight.
I said in my introduction that other attacks on specific religious and racial groups have continued around the world in the last quarter of a century. And there is a concern, I don't know, Safet, whether you share this, there is a concern that the rise of the far right and other extremist groups perhaps demonstrates that the lessons of Srebrenica and Prijedor have not been learned.
Well, they haven't. We can see what's been happening over the last few years. And if you look at currently things, we have countries that supposedly have concentration camps, yet what is the international community doing about actually coming to the bottom of that story, finding out, sending investigators? It's really sad to see that UN itself has not changed for me at all since Srebrenica, and it's been already mentioned, Rwanda was failed during the Bosnian failure of UN. And it's so easy to blame the Dutch battalion because they were there at the time. I blame the UN. There were UN forces at the time. And how are we going to move forward? I was shouting back in 94, 95 during demonstrations in London, UN useless, and it was then, and I still feel it is now, but we do need UN. I don't like this idea of Eastern and Western blocs. We need to have an international organization that will go in wherever there is a need. We cannot rely on being friends with Big Brother like USA or Britain, etc., or Russia, because that's how it seems to work. If you're friendly with someone, they will come in to your aid. If you're not, like we weren't in Bosnia, we were stuck in the middle between Serbia and Croatia. European governments imposed effectively embargo on Bosnian army, the only legitimate army. How can you allow that? How can you make sense of that? It's very difficult. So my hope is for education, with children actually learning from young age, not about Holocaust in terms of numbers or Srebrenica or Bosnia genocide or Rwanda genocide in terms of numbers of people killed, but actually how these things developed, how we failed in stopping it, preventing it in the first place, and how we haven't done, for example, in Bosnia itself. When the World War II finished, Nazis didn't weren't allowed to stay in power and control occupied Europe. In Bosnia, you have effectively that case where the occupied side has remained occupied, and it's run by people that celebrate Radovan Karadzic and Ratko Mladic as heroes. Genocide.
I was going to spend a larger part of this program than's been possible because of the extraordinary emotional testaments that you've given me, talking about lack of tolerance. Peter Handke, winner of the Nobel Prize for Literature last year, they're putting up a statue to him in Banja Luka. He is a genocide denier. I don't want to ask you specifically, Emir and Almasa, as we come towards the end of this program, about him. You can refer to him if you wish, but you have to live alongside people who are perhaps intolerant still, who are perhaps genocide deniers, but you also live alongside people who are still your friends, who were on the other side. How's that possible?
Well, my family, actually, my brother, my mother and I, we returned to our burned village in 2004, actually, which is 22 kilometers from Srebrenica. And it's the only natural border from Serbia that's dividing us is River Drina, actually. And we were so close that they could see us as on the back of their palm. So we had friends. My deceased uncle, who was a teacher in the school, had friends who were from Serbia, actually, and they were colleagues and friends. And still this happened. Nobody warned us what was going to happen, and we still have so many people coming, going through our village. And my mother would say, we know him, he is from here, he is Serbian, he actually was he was participating in their army, and still they walk among us. Most of them simply do not feel regret of any kind of what they did, or a shame. So it's very difficult to live among them so closely. However, we cannot say that all people are the same. I have so many friends of other religions, of other ethnicities, so I'm proud of that, actually. But you still have so many of those who are denying, who were participating, and the problem is not really actually them, but it's their lessons to their kids. to the younger generations.
Indeed.
And that is what worries me most, because so many younger generations are growing up and they simply do not research. They don't come to Potachari. They don't come to see what happened. They don't want to hear testimonies, they don't have personal questions. Simply they accept the truth of those who were participating in those crimes and wars, and simply they see it as an area that what needed to be cleansed from us, let's say, even though
Let
our
us hope
families
some
lived there
lessons.
for the centuries.
Sorry, let us hope lessons can be learned by anybody who's watching this program about what happened then and what should not happen in the future, and also from the Srebrenica Memorial Center. Emir, I was going to bring you in at the end there, but well, look, it's been so powerful. I would like to end with a little bit more of that film, The Fog of Srebrenica, and just something that I saw in a small excerpt at the beginning, where one man said, for the future generations, I have to say that they should liberate themselves for history. I didn't quite know what he meant, but I watched all the way through to the end. He was from the Muslim side, he was Bosniak, and what he actually said at the end is, we have to remember that we have to live together. Thank you, all three of you, for taking part in this program, one of the most powerful programs I think I've ever hosted. Thank you very much indeed. And goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you.